into the CFB Season Show. I'm your host, CFB Talk '07. You can follow me on Twitter at CFB Talk '07. You can follow the show account at CFB_SZN. We got an awesome show tonight. Cameron from Press Box After Dark. How you doing, Cameron?
Doing well, man. Thank you for having me.
Before we got in, I should have said this pre-show. Before we get into all the West Virginia Big 12 stuff, tell everybody a little bit about Press Box After Dark. I've listened to a couple episodes and interacted with you guys. It's awesome. I really love the show. Tell everybody kind of like what it's about and where they can find it.
Yeah, man. It's just a group of five of us. I joke sometimes that we should have just called ourselves the Group of Five Podcasts. But we all met working in college athletics, working at a small D1 school out in Texas. And we were all working a baseball game one day. And, baseball games, they tend to drag on and get kind of boring as the night goes on. And so we would have some pretty crazy, interesting conversations up in the press box. And I think our PA announcer actually coined the term one night. He was like, man, this is like Press Box After Dark. And we basically told each other, if we ever make a podcast or something like that, because we would always joke about that, we're going to call ourselves Press Box After Dark. So little over a year ago, we started making the blog, and then shortly thereafter started making some podcasts. And we don't do everything sports. We kind of jump all over the place. We do we just did a Happy Gilmore, or not a Happy Gilmore. We did an Adam Sandler movie draft night thing, and we do some trivia. So we do a bunch of fun stuff. We keep it light. So we're on Twitter at PressBoxAD, and then we're also on TikTok and make some funny clips over there too. So yeah, we just have a good time.
I love it. It's really unique, and you can get a little bit of everything. You can get your sports talk, movie. It's really cool. I'll have to go check out that episode because I'm a big Adam Sandler fan. So I have to go see how that one went. All right. So you are a West Virginia fan.
Right.
Is that something you were born into it, grew up in the West Virginia fandom?
Yep. I grew up in Virginia, actually, but all of my family is from West Virginia, so it's a big family thing. And we had season tickets in the Pat White era, and so I was up there for 90% of those games. And what a fun time that was. But yeah, kind of just born into it.
Yeah, I like that. That's a wonderful transition. So Rich Rod comes back. I'm usually the guy that screams. I'm usually not a fan of the retread hires, but he's like, we had a Big 12 preview, and I had actually mentioned it. I was like, I'm gonna look like a hypocrite because he's actually the one I'm loving being rehired. What was the initial reaction? Because I imagine by now most West Virginia fans, if they were mad, I don't think they would be, but if they were, they're pretty happy now. But what was the initial reaction from you and maybe some of your West Virginia buddies when that hire was made?
The initial reaction for me, I was pretty excited. The hiring process after Neil Brown was fired kind of dragged on a little bit more than maybe myself and other fans would have thought. I feel like they had some other guys that they may have wanted, but in the end, Rich Rod ended up being the guy, and I was okay with that. I will say that I was kind of surprised at how quickly some of the fan base got on board. I was really expecting a large portion of the fan base to really, be taking out their pitchforks and stuff. But I think everyone got on board pretty quickly. And he gets it, right? At the end of the day, he knows what it's going to take to succeed at West Virginia, and he's a native as well. So whether or not that's going to translate to wins and losses, during the season is TBD. But I think people are pretty excited about it. And, people think back to, the 07 season and think about how good he had it at West Virginia. And he really has not done that bad at his other stops. He gets a lot of hate for the time that he had at Michigan. my strong opinion on this is that he was starting to turn things around at Michigan
Yeah,
before he got fired, and then Brady Hoke swooped in and took all of his recruits and his team to the promised land. Um, after he left Michigan, he did well at Arizona. He's always had a phenomenal dual threat quarterback wherever he's been, whether it's been Pat White, Denard Robinson, Khalil Tate at Arizona. He's always been able to implement his offense over the years. So I'm really excited. I think there's a lot to be optimistic about.
yeah. I remember it. That was in the height of my college football fandom. It's when I first got into college football fandom. When the whole Pat White and that thing, and I was memorized by that whole era. I'll never forget watching all those games as a kid, and I think it was the not to bring up bad memories, but I'll never forget as a watching like the Pitt was it Pitt West Virginia that ended like the whole national championship thing.
Yeah.
God, I remember watching that. That era was so fun. Do you think he can recreate that at West Virginia, or is the game, the college football landscape, is it different now? Is it going to be a little too hard?
Yeah, I'll be curious to see if the landscape has passed him. You know, if he's going to be able to keep up um, with the game these days. He just took Jacksonville State through a FCS to FBS transition and was really really great with them. Obviously, it's a different level, but he did really well with them, and so he has modern success in this kind of era. But things are still changing. Very brand new, basically salary cap this year. So even though he's had recent successes at Jacksonville State, I mean, so much has already changed since he took the job. So it'll, be a big wait and see. But I am excited. I think he also brings a good staff with him. The new defensive coordinator, Zach
Yeah,
Alley, was with Rich Rod at Jacksonville State for a year before he went to Oklahoma to become the defensive coordinator. And Oklahoma, as bad of a season that they had last year, they had a
yeah,
top 20 defense in the country, very good. And Zach Alley, in my opinion, is one of the best up and coming coaches in the country, and is making a 1.5 million. He signed a 3-year, $4.5 million deal, and he's one of the highest paid coordinators in the country, and I think for a reason. So I think there's a lot of optimism on that side of the ball too, at least in the future. Maybe not this year, we'll see, but
yeah.
uh, he's a strong staff member to have.
Yeah, I'd actually wrote that in my notes. I remember when he left Oklahoma, and I'm a sicko. I like to go like read meltdowns on message boards. So my first thing, I went to Oklahoma, and I wasn't really expecting a meltdown, but they were melting down. They were pissed.
Yeah,
They loved that guy, and that kind of put me on the radar. Because I'll be honest, I honestly thought Venables was calling the plays and didn't realize he was actually a big part of the success there. And like you said, a lot of the focus is on Oklahoma's offense, but that defense was nasty.
yeah.
Um, and from everything I read, he was a big part of it, and was the play caller. And man, Oklahoma fans were not happy. So that's usually a good indication when the fan base is melting down about somebody leaving. Because I can tell you as a Georgia fan, I don't. There will be no meltdown if Mike Bobo left. So, uh, but let's get into the team a little bit. I couldn't find it earlier, but is it? I think I read this a couple of weeks back. I don't know if it's true. Is it like 50 portal editions, or how many
I
was it?
think it's 50 plus. I think it's between 50, 60, maybe on the upper range of that. It's one of the top, if not the top number in the country this year. But I mean, he cleaned house.
Now, yeah, yeah. Who is How's the quarterback situation looking? I think it's between Henderson, which was A&M guy, and Nico, who kind of
Yeah,
filled in for Green last year. Who do you think is it Nico's job to lose, or is there a real competition there?
I do. I think it's Nico's to lose, but I will say I do think it's a real competition.
Yeah,
Um, Nico, yeah, last year, and he's kind of been biding his time. Kind of sitting behind Green the past couple years, and did get some good opportunities last year specifically during some time where Green was injured. And I would have to go back and check that. I believe Nico is 4-0 as a starter at West
Mhm.
Virginia, with some very good experience. So I do like the way that Nico has played. I'm curious to see how Rich Rod would implement him into the offense. Nico is kind of he's not your typical dual threat kind of guy. He's more of a power run guy. He's very strong and does run the ball well, but he's not your Pat White or Khalil Tate. Um, but he's experienced and he wants to be a Mountaineer. Could have left and gone somewhere. So he's good to have in the room. And I really do think that it's his to lose. The second option, as you mentioned, is Jalen Henderson, coming from Texas A&M, who we talked about this a little bit on our podcast. He torched a few teams in his freshman season at Texas A&M and then dealt with an injury. Um, so he's got a lot of promise, and even if he doesn't get the job this year, he could be the guy for years to come, because I believe he still has 3 years of eligibility. So he's a strong quarterback to really push the room. And then there's a couple other guys. We did get a transfer from Charlotte, Max Brown, I believe. I don't think he will factor too much into it. And then we have a couple freshmen on the team who will hopefully be a little better later on. But that's kind of the situation right now.
Yeah. Moving on to the running back, Jaheim White. Thinking about Rich Rod and his offenses and how he loves to run the ball and the different creative ways he run the ball. That's got to be pretty exciting to think about him working with White.
Absolutely. Um, Rich Rod has always had great running backs at West Virginia. You go back to when he started in 2001. He had guys like Quincy Harris, or Quincy Wilson, KJ Harris, Noel Devine, Steve Slayton. I mean, the list goes on. He just had so many playmakers in the backfield. And Jaheim White was one of the lone bright spots on the team last year and the year before that. So, and a lot of people thought that he was going to leave. Our running backs coach ended up leaving, Chad Scott, and a lot of people thought that he might follow Chad, but he decided to stay at West Virginia. I think he's going to be maybe the best running back in the Big 12, and certainly one of the best in the country. There's lot a lot of high expectations for him, I guess. I think the big thing, obviously, you can't just be one running back. You got to have multiple
Yeah.
guys. We did get some transfers. We got Jalen Knighton from SMU, who's
Mhm.
speedster, really good player, as well as Ty Edwards, who was the leading rusher at Northern Iowa, kind of a downhill big bruiser, but moves well with his weight. So there's probably going to be a little more than just Jaheim behind
Mhm.
him, which will be good for him so that he's not toting the rock every single time.
Yeah, I think the Knighton and White one will be fun to watch because Knighton, he was actually, as I'm sure you know, SMU's leading rusher in 2023 before he got hurt.
Yep.
And he had like a season-ending injury in 24. But yeah, I'm that's probably the most excited about the team I am to watch because of Rich Rod's history of running the running game, and all that, and the option. Sorry, I'm having trouble here. The option and all that stuff. The offensive line, that seems like. Yeah, are you pretty concerned on that? I was doing some
Often,
research today, and looking like that's going to be a work in progress, maybe.
yeah, definitely a work in progress. We lose 4 of our 5 starters from last year's team, and the offensive line, truthfully, under Neil Brown, our offensive line, were all of our offensive lines under him were typically really good units.
Mhm.
Um, some really, really talented players that uh, have gone on to the NFL. Wyatt Milam, Zach Frazier. There's a lot of guys. Doug Nestor, that are in the NFL now. Um, And so there's a lot of people to replace. And obviously, Rich Rod's going to implement his own scheme, and so he went in the portal and grabbed a bunch of guys. We got guys from Oklahoma, LSU,
Mhm.
Arkansas, Tulsa. We got so many guys. I think you're going to see maybe one returner on that line. And the offensive line's a big deal for Rich Rod and his offense because they, especially if he's going to be running, the types of offenses that he ran at West Virginia. Um, his offensive lines were kind of out there. They were a little undersized, but they were very athletic and agile, able to get upfield, able to move laterally, and that was how we created so many holes with those old teams in the 2000s. So I'll be curious to see how he implements the offensive line. Like I
Yeah.
said, it's a lot of new people, so they're going to have to gel pretty quickly. So that's definitely a wait and see part of the team.
Yeah, definitely. That'll probably decide the season there, especially with how Rich Rod wants to run the ball. Defensive side, like we talked about, Zach Alley getting hired away from Oklahoma, and like you had mentioned, may not be this year, but definitely in the future, it's probably going to be proven to be a great hire. What that side of the ball was pretty bad last year. When I was looking at all the numbers and stuff, they were like 126th in passing D, 110th in scoring D. It's just a lot of bad on there. How quick do you think? Do you think Zach Alley can get it? I don't know, top. Let's see, top 70
I,
year
I
one.
as you were thinking, I'm thinking in my head as well. I'm like, man, I think if he gets it into like the top 60, I'd be pretty happy.
Yeah,
Just based off of last year. Now, again, Rich Rod did clean house. There's not a lot of returners on that side either. I think really the main returners that we have are on the linebacker level,
yeah,
with Ben Cutter and Reed Carrico, who were decent players. Nothing really wrong with them, but that's one area where I'm like, I would have liked to have seen us made a bigger splash in the portal.
yeah,
So linebackers definitely a little bit of a concern. I do think up front on the line, there's a lot of promise there. We
yeah,
got some pretty strong transfers. Eddie Kelly from Missouri, who was a solid player for them, and one of the best transfers in the country, Jamori Robinson from
yeah.
UTSA. 17 tackles for loss, and I think 10 and a half sacks last year.
Yeah,
Just
he's a
a
beast.
just a beast on the edge.
Yeah,
And we do have a couple other returners at the defensive tackle position. So I think that position group is going to be very strong. And if you're strong up front, I believe this on both sides. If you're strong up front, you can make up for some weak spots in other places. I do think the secondary will be a place to watch. I think we could
mhm,
be. I think there's a big range there. Linebackers, I'm
yeah,
definitely worried about. The secondary, I think it could go either way. We did get some pretty solid transfers there. Two of the top rated cornerback transfers in the country, and according to PFF, they're the I think number one and number three returners in the Big 12.
mm,
So a lot to look forward to there. Just again, kind of how we were saying with the offensive line, it'll depend on how well they gel and play together, because it's so many new faces. But I'm intrigued with the defense. I think Zach Alley will also have some
mm,
influence on their development. So I'll be curious to see how they do.
yeah, definitely. Well, the West Virginia stuff, man, that was great stuff there. But before we move on to a little bit of Big 12 football, what year one, Rich Rod? What is your what would give you satisfaction? Realistically, at the end of the season, where you're like, okay, I'm good. This was a success.
Yeah, we talked about this on the podcast when I did my little preview for West Virginia. But if you go back to when Rich Rod was first hired at West Virginia in 2001,
Yeah,
he was hired right after Don Nehlen retired, who was one of the best college football coaches ever, definitely the best West Virginia football coach ever. And it's hard to follow the guy. Um,
yeah,
I mean, you look at Kalen DeBoer right now at Alabama. It's incredibly tough to follow Nick Saban, and so it was hard for Rich Rod to be in that position in the early 2000s and filling in for Don Nealon's and filling in his shoes. And in his first year, Rich Rod went 3-9, and so a lot of people were kind of shaky on Rich Rod early, and then in his second year, he goes 9-3, and then shortly after that, he has an 8-win season, then boom, 11 wins. And so he's been known to step in and improve teams. It might not be right away, but I do think that he's going to improve the team. In terms of expectations for this season, I would be really happy with a bowl appearance. I think if we go 6-6, I think that's a good start to the Rich Rod era. And the one thing that I have to look forward to is that Rich Rod's teams tend to get better as the year goes on. A lot of times we saw with Neil Brown, his teams would, maybe have a decent start, a couple good months, and then they would fizzle out late. And we saw that under Dana Holgerson a few times as well, just going back a little further in the past. So I'm hopeful that Rich Rod will have his team getting better as the year goes on. In terms of disappointment, I think anything under 5 wins, I'd be pretty disappointed because I do think in the non-conference schedule we should go at least 2-1. But it's a brand new team, and so it's hard to have really, really high expectations. But like I said, I think if we get to a bowl game, that's a pretty good start.
Yeah, agreed. Well, before we get to Big 12, you mentioned Neil Brown. I wanted to actually bring this up on the top of the show, but I forgot. Neil Brown, what went wrong, man? Like I when he was hired, I praised that hire. I thought it was going to be a grand slam. What went wrong?
Well, we did too, man. We're the ones that got duped big time.
Yeah.
We saw how good of a job he did at Troy, and we were thrilled. And the he had the big win against LSU. There was another game there. I can't remember if it was an upset or if
I do remember the LSU one.
Yeah. So I mean he was getting it done at that level and really showed promise. And so we were all excited. And it sucks because Neil Brown is one of the classiest guys. And it sucked that he didn't find success at West Virginia because he really did. He's one of those guys that you just want to succeed. So that was disappointing. But I just think the team lacked a sort of toughness or edge. It felt like in a lot of games we'd get down and then we'd be done or we would make dumb mistakes. At Penn State last year, we turn over Penn State and then the very next play we turn it over. Silly things like that happened a lot in his tenure. And so, I mean, there was a little bit of a lack of discipline, it felt like. And I think, I'm sitting here thinking, what did go wrong? I'm sitting here thinking, I just watched the Buccaneers play a preseason game the other night, and Garrett Green is out at wide receiver catching passes all over the field, and he looks like a good receiver. And it's like, why was he at quarterback? You know what I mean? Like, it seems like our best athlete was at quarterback instead of wide receiver, where he was a better player. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I'm nitpicking, but it just seemed like we lacked a sort of edge.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we've got probably like 5 minutes. We'll do a little bit of Big 12. I don't know if you discussed it on the show, so if you don't want to tell it yet, Big 12 championship prediction?
Gosh, that's a tough one because you look at you look at Arizona State and you're like, okay, they made the playoff, they lose Scadaboo, but they still got Levitt. They got, forget the guy's name, really good receiver.
Tyson. I think it's Tyson. Is it Tyson?
I don't know. I can't remember his name. I'm blanking on it right now. But on paper they still have a really good team even without Scadaboo. But a lot of people forget they were one loss away from not even making the Big 12 championship game last year. That's
Yep.
how tight the top of the conference was. So, I mean, any result goes the other way, and we're talking about Arizona State this year probably being a middle of the road team. So I do like Arizona State. I think I also like who do I like? I like Iowa State. They
Yes.
always have a solid team. I like Kansas State. I think Colorado is about to take a big step back. Actually,
Yes.
I think Dion can only do so much.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I'm with
as,
you on that one.
as much as I'm one of the guys on the podcast that tries not to hate on Dion
Yeah,
so
that's
much
me too.
because I really do have respect for what he's done.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the media kind of blows it out of proportion and is kind of unfair towards him. But I do like those teams. I like Baylor. I think they're going to have a good offense. I like Sawyer Robertson. Um, TCU, kind of a sneaky one.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of in the bottom pack, I'm curious to see how Arizona bounces back after
Yeah.
having such a weird season with everybody thinking that they would be at the top with Fafita and
Yeah.
McMillan, and then did nothing. They were terrible. I'm curious how Oklahoma State's going to respond. After having bad season, then great season, and then bad season again. It's very weird. And Gundy's obviously a good coach.
Yeah.
I think he could potentially be on the hot seat though if he doesn't have a good year.
Yeah.
And then
Definitely.
Texas Tech, I don't know what to expect out of them. They've this year isn't brand new. The past 2 or 3 years they have started the process of paying these players more and more and more, and
Mhm.
I'm just wondering when it's going to pay off for them. I
Yeah.
I don't mind the Texas Tech program.
Mhm.
I think they got a lot of passion, and I think they deserve to see some better football there.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if the money is going to translate to wins for them because we just haven't seen it yet. If it does, I really won't be surprised because they have so many great athletes. But
Mhm.
it kind of remains to be seen if those are actually going to translate to wins. So those are my 4 or 5 teams that I would expect to see. If I had to pick it today, I would probably say Arizona State and Texas Tech.
I have a wild one. We did when we did our Big 12. We did consensus, and I got outvoted unfortunately. But I have Arizona State and a team I was waiting on it. You didn't mention them. Utah.
See,
I think I
I'm
think they could. I
interested.
think they could flip it. I think they could flip it.
I am interested to see what the post Cam Rising era looks like
Mhm.
because they always have a solid team, and it's going to be interesting what they do without him. I've been kind of a Cam Rising hater the past couple years.
Yeah, me too.
I think he's been holding them back, to be
Me
completely
too.
honest. So if they kind of came out of their shell a little bit, I really wouldn't be that surprised.
Right.
Um, but it's just such a weird conference. It's like so many of these conferences, you know what to expect. Like that Georgia and Alabama and Tennessee, like these teams are going to be great. Michigan,
Mhm.
well maybe not last year's Michigan, but
Yeah.
like Ohio State and Penn State. But you get to the Big 12 and it's like we don't know anymore.
And that's what I love about it. On our show, I call it America's Conference. Well, Josh Pate calls it that. I copied him, but it is to me America's Conference. It's my favorite conference. There's so much parity in that league. You can make a case for probably everybody but Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, maybe one or two more after that. But anybody can win that league, and it's kind of evident by Arizona State. I think they were picked, down near the bottom, if I remember right.
Dead
They're the
last.
whole reason the media poll is gone away
Yeah,
on the dead last.
they
So
were
it would
dead
not
last
surprise
last
me.
year.
And I love that conference. I give people hell a little bit because you always hear people say, we want more parity in college football, and I'm like, y'all kind of lying a little bit because if you really wanted that, there's a conference that you're not watching that much based on TV ratings. That if you really love parity, the Big 12 in ratings should be blowing everybody out because that is basically not talent wise, but like parity wise, that it's the NFL. Because like you go look at every point spread, it's like 3.5. It's just like the NFL. I don't think you see more than 7.5 in the NFL. Like the point spreads are so small, and in the Big 12, it's even smaller. So I love the Big 12. Man, Cameron, I appreciate you coming on here. We hit right at 30 minutes. That was an awesome West Virginia preview. I'm rooting for the Mountaineers this year, and yeah, man, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, man. It's fun.
Yeah, and everybody go check out the show, Press Box After Dark. I enjoy it. If you want some all kind of stuff, football, movies, TV, trivia, all that stuff, they have good stuff. It's a great show. Y'all go check them out, and we'll see y'all next time.